Before we dive in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more gripping true crime stories just like this. He had the perfect plan, fake evidence, a dead man who couldn't defend himself, and a courtroom full of people ready to believe every word. But here's the thing about perfect plans. They have a way of unraveling at exactly the wrong moment. Marcus Holt was the kind of employee who showed up early, stayed late, and smiled at everything his boss said, even when he was seething underneath. For 6 years, he worked under Regional Director Dale Fennick at a mid-sized logistics company in Ohio. And for 6 years, Marcus had been passed over for promotions, talked over in meetings, and quietly blamed for mistakes that weren't his. By most accounts, Dale Fennick wasn't a monster. He was something worse. He was careless. Careless with credit. Careless with people. The type of manager who doesn't realize he's destroyed someone until it's too late. And with Marcus, it was already too late. In the spring of 2019, Marcus was let go. The official reason, performance issues, but Marcus knew the truth, or at least he believed he did. He was convinced Dale had engineered his firing to cover up financial irregularities Marcus had stumbled onto, discrepancies in inventory logs that didn't add up. He couldn't prove it, but that belief, whether accurate or distorted, became the seed of something dangerous. He decided he wasn't going to walk away quietly. Over the following months, Marcus built what he thought was an airtight case. He crafted a series of emails, fake ones, designed to look like they came from Dale's work account. In these fabricated messages, Dale appeared to instruct junior employees to falsify shipping records, accept kickbacks from vendors, and skim funds from the company's petty cash accounts. Marcus was meticulous. He studied the way Dale wrote, his sign-offs, his abbreviations, the casual typos he'd let slide. He used a spoofed email address that, at first glance, looked identical to Dale's corporate one. He printed the emails, aged them slightly, and assembled a folder that looked like months of documented wrongdoing. Then he went to the police. His story was compelling. A whistleblower, frightened, finally coming forward with proof of corporate fraud. Investigators opened a case. Dale Fennick was placed on administrative leave. The company's reputation took an immediate hit. And Marcus, for a brief, intoxicating moment, felt like he had one. But there was a complication, a significant one. Dale Fennick suffered a heart attack 3 weeks after being placed on leave. He died in his home, alone, at 58 years old. Officially, the stress of the investigation was listed as a contributing factor. Marcus hadn't planned for that. No one had. The investigation continued even after Dale's death. Prosecutors, now working a fraud case with a deceased suspect, began digging deeper. And that's when things started to fall apart, not loudly, but quietly, the way the truth usually does. A forensic digital analyst was brought in to verify the emails. What she found stopped the case cold. The metadata embedded in the files, invisible to the naked eye, but plain as day to anyone who knew where to look, told a completely different story. The emails had been created on a personal laptop, not a corporate server. The timestamps were inconsistent with Dale's login history. And one of the emails referenced a vendor contract that hadn't existed until 4 months after the email was supposedly sent. The emails were fake, and the trail led directly back to Marcus Holt. What happened next is where this story takes a turn that no one in that courtroom was fully prepared for. Marcus was arrested and charged with fraud, filing a false police report, and because Dale's death had been partly attributed to the stress of the wrongful investigation, prosecutors pursued an additional charge of criminally negligent homicide. It was aggressive and controversial, but they pursued it. Marcus hired a defense attorney who argued the homicide charge was a stretch, that no one could have predicted Dale would die, that correlation wasn't causation. And legally, he had a point. The charge was difficult to make stick. But what the defense attorney couldn't argue away was everything else. At trial, the prosecution brought in the digital forensics analyst. She walked the jury through the metadata, line by line. She explained, in plain language, how every single email had been manufactured. She showed the jury the vendor contract discrepancy, the email that referenced a deal that didn't exist yet. It was the kind of detail that makes a jury's jaw drop because it's so specific, so technical, and so utterly damning. Marcus sat at the defense table and barely moved. People in the gallery said later that he looked like a man watching a building he deconstructed brick by brick get demolished in real time. Then the prosecution did something unexpected. They called Dale Fennick's daughter to the stand. She wasn't there to offer evidence. She was there to speak about her father, about who he was, what the investigation had done to him in his final weeks. She described phone calls where he cried, the man who had never cried in front of his family. She described him refusing to eat, barely sleeping, convinced that people he'd worked with for years now thought he was a criminal. The defense objected multiple times. Some of it was struck from the record, but some of it wasn't. And what wasn't struck had already landed. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. Marcus was convicted of fraud, filing a false police report, and obstruction of justice. The criminally negligent homicide charge was ultimately dropped. The legal bar was to high, the causation to indirect. But the judge, during sentencing, made clear that Dale Fennick's death weighed heavily in the room. Marcus received 7 years. He would later appeal, arguing the trial had been prejudiced by the emotional testimony. The appeal was denied. Here's what this case leaves you sitting with. Marcus Holt may have had real grievances. The inventory discrepancies he noticed. Investigators looked into them even after his fraud was exposed and found nothing. But nothing was ever definitively ruled out either. We'll never know what Dale actually did or didn't do because Marcus burned the possibility of ever finding out. He replaced the truth with something he manufactured and in doing so destroyed to lives, Dale's and his own. There's a version of this story where Marcus reports his suspicions, gets ignored, and walks away frustrated. That version ends quietly. Unfairly, maybe, but quietly. Instead, he chose the other version. And in that version, a man is dead, a family is shattered, and Marcus Holt is counting down years in a cell, undone not by bad luck, but by a time stamp on a file that nobody was supposed to find.